One.
Aloha, I'm Scott Makuakane of the Senior Counsel Division of the Hawaii State Bar Association. And on behalf of the Senior Counsel Division, it's my privilege to introduce Jerry Clay, who is a founding member of the firm now known as Clay Iwamura Pulice Nervell. And after 54 years of practice and mostly litigation, Jerry is now the happiest he's ever been in his life, as he's introducing the world to a paradigm that he hopes is going to catch on, and he is convinced it's going to bring societal change. And that paradigm is partnering. So Jerry Clay, please take it away.
Thank you, Scott. Well, let's start by saying welcome to those here in person and welcome to those who are watching remotely. I think you'll find today very interesting, but more than that, I think you will see why partnering is such a change for the legal industry. A little bit about me, as Scott mentioned, I've practiced more than 54 years, and in December, I stopped my general practice because I intend to spend the rest of my working life, which I intend to do until I can't work anymore, doing something that is a lot more satisfying, gratifying, and helpful to clients. So let's talk just a little bit. My background, I've had a lot of experience doing third-party neutral work, arbitration, mediation, and then I have discovered something new, which we'll talk about today. Partner.
What prevents us from seeing, accepting, and understanding new ideas? Think about some of the new ideas we've seen in the past 2 decades. From minorities fighting for their basic rights, to those rights being guaranteed by law. From room-sized computers costing millions of dollars to desktop computers just as powerful that almost anyone can afford. From an attitude that quality was a luxury for the few to quality being expected by everyone. These changes and hundreds like them are more than mere improvements. They are revolutions. They are changing the world forever. They are causing us to reevaluate old ways of doing things. They are opening doors to possibilities we could not have seen before. They are freeing us from limitations. And yet every one of these ideas was met with substantial resistance from thoughtful people. Let me ask you again, what is it that keeps us from accepting new ideas? I know the answer to that question. And once you know the answer, you will be more open to innovation, more capable of leading change. You will be ready to discover the future. You see, it all has to do with paradigm. Paradigm. That's an unusual word. You don't hear it every day. I stumbled onto it almost 20 years ago during my studies of scientific discovery. It was a word Thomas Kuhn used to describe a key concept in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. If you look paradigm up in the Webster's dictionary, you'd find it means a pattern or a model. Let me offer you another definition. Paradigms are sets of rules and regulations that do 2 things. First, they establish boundaries. In a sense, that's what a pattern does. It gives us the edges, the borders. Second, these rules and regulations then go on to tell you how to be successful by solving problems within these boundaries. In his book, Thomas Kuhn was exploring how scientists changed their paradigms of physics or chemistry or biology, and what happened when they did. What he found helps explain why we so often fail to anticipate significant new developments. What he found can help you and me deal with change more effectively. So, what did he discover? Kuhn discovered that paradigms act as filters that screen data coming into the scientist's mind. Data that agrees with the scientist's paradigm has an easy pathway to recognition. In fact, scientists see that kind of data amazingly well with great clarity and understanding, and that's good. But Kuhn also discovered a startling negative effect. With some of the data, scientists had substantial difficulty. Why? Because that data did not match the expectations created by their paradigms. And in fact, the more unexpected the data was, the more trouble the scientists had perceiving it. In some cases, they simply ignored the unexpected data. Sometimes they distorted that data until it fit their paradigm rather than acknowledge that it was an exception to the rules. And in extreme cases, Kuhn discovered that scientists literally, physiologically were incapable of perceiving the unexpected data. For all intents and purposes, that data was invisible. To put it in more general terms, paradigms filter incoming experience. We are viewing the world through our paradigms all the time. We constantly select from the world that data that best fits our rules and regulations and try to ignore the rest. As a result, what may be perfectly obvious to a person with one paradigm may be totally imperceptible to someone with a different paradigm. I call this phenomenon the paradigm effect. And I have seen repeatedly that what Kuhn describes for scientists is true for anyone who has strongly held rules and regulations in their lives. And who doesn't? In my work with companies around the world, I have seen this paradigm effect blind business people to new opportunities, cause salespeople to overlook new markets, obscure effective strategies from management. And it can blind each and every one of us to creative solutions to difficult problems. Whether it's the Army or the environmental movement, the American Medical Association or the League of Women Voters, whether it's Citibank or IBM, the coach's way to hit the ball or mom's way to clean the kitchen, we deal with paradigms all the time. And I believe that it is our rules and regulations that keep us from successfully anticipating the future, because we try to discover the future by looking for it through our old paradigms. And so in the 1960s, we looked forward and concluded, cheap gas forever. 4 children make an ideal family. Cable television will never catch on. Japanese products will always be junk. And boy, were we wrong. And we were wrong because our paradigms had the power to keep us from seeing what was really happening. Now, you may think this is an interesting abstraction. So I would like to give you concrete examples that demonstrate how paradigms influence the way you and I see and understand the world. There is a story told in business circles worth repeating here. In the late 1930s, an inventor was trying to interest corporations in his new idea. He experienced rejection after rejection because no one was taking his invention seriously. He brought it to the research department of a major photographic company. He felt sure they would be interested because his invention was a new kind of photography. Here is the actual kit he used to demonstrate the process. While a senior researcher looked on, he began by sensitizing a specially coated metal plate. Then he took a transparency and placed the metal plate on top of it and exposed both to a very bright light. Then he poured a fine black powder over the plate and tapped the excess away. What was left on the plate was a faint reminder of the image that had been on the slide. He had, in fact, created a kind of photograph of that image. Now, we don't know what the researcher said about all this. He may have found it amusing and laughed. He may have said it was too complicated or too crude, or he may have been upset at all the black powder all over his desk. But we do know one thing for sure. He wasn't interested in that silly invention, so he showed the inventor to the door. But the inventor, Chester Carlson, had the last laugh. Here's a copy of his original patent. His discovery turned out to be one of the most profitable innovations in the history of industry. You see, what Chester Carlton invented was electrostatic photography, the Xerox process. Imagine any office today without a copier. But that photographic researcher was blinded to the potential of this new invention because it didn't fit his rules and regulations of how photography should be. He was unable to see beyond his paradigm. As a result, his company missed one of the biggest business opportunities of the 20th century. Let me show you another example of the power and influence of paradigms. There is a crucial and profound truth hiding behind all the paradigm examples I've shown you. I call it the going back to zero rule, and if you remember nothing else, remember this. When a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. It doesn't matter how big your market share is, or how strong your reputation, or how good you are at the old paradigm. With the new one, you go back to zero. Your past success guarantees nothing. Now, you may think I'm exaggerating, so let me illustrate. What nation dominated the world of watchmaking in 1968? Of course, Switzerland, renowned for more than 100 years for watchmaking excellence. In 1968, they had 65% of the world market share, and according to expert estimations, more than 80% of the profits. That's market domination. Yet, 10 years later, their market share had plummeted to below 10%, and in the ensuing 3 years, they had to release 50,000 of their 65,000 watch workers. Today, what nation dominates the world in watchmaking? Japan. In 1968, they had virtually no market share. How could the Swiss, who commanded the watchmaking industry for the entire 20th century, who were known for excellence and innovation in their products, be so rapidly destroyed? Well, the answer is painfully simple. They were put back to zero by a paradigm shift. Many of you are wearing that paradigm shift on your wrists right now. The quartz movement watch. Think about it. Totally electronic. 1,000 times more accurate than the mechanical watches it replaced. Battery powered. Amazingly versatile. It deserves to be the new paradigm of timekeeping. It's such a brilliant idea. Wouldn't you like to know who invented this marvelous watch? Some of you know the answer, but those of you who don't will be surprised. The quartz watch was invented by the Swiss themselves, right here in Neuchâtel at the research laboratories. Yet when the researchers presented this idea to the Swiss watch manufacturers in 1967, it was rejected. After all, it didn't have any bearings, it didn't have any gears, it didn't even have a mainspring. It couldn't possibly be the future of watches. So confident were the manufacturers in that conclusion that they didn't even protect the idea. And so later that year, their researchers displayed the watch to the world at the annual Watch Congress. Texas Instruments of America and Seiko Japan walked past, took one look, and the rest is history. Now, why didn't the Swiss appreciate this wonderful invention that their own people had created? It's the power of paradigms again. They were blinded by the success of their old paradigm and all their investments in it. And when confronted with a profoundly new and different way to continue their success into the future, they rejected it because it didn't fit the rules they were already so good at. Please keep in mind that this is a story not just about the Swiss. It's a story about anyone, any organization, any nation who assumes what has been successful in the past must continue to be successful in the future. Let me remind you once again, when a paradigm shifts, everyone goes back to zero. Your past guarantees nothing in the future if the rules change. Not even the best watchmakers in the world could stop time. In fact, if you're not careful, your successful past will block your vision to the future. And that is why you must develop an openness to new ideas, a willingness to explore different ways of doing things, because only through that kind of tolerance can you keep open your doors to the future. I could go on and on with examples. I have more than 350 in my files. The key point here is paradigms dramatically affect our judgments, and our decision-making by influencing our perceptions. And it is clear to me that if we want to make good judgments about the future, to anticipate the future successfully, we must be able to recognize our present paradigms and then be ready to go beyond them. You see, a paradigm is a two-edged sword. When you swing it one way, it cuts the information that agrees with it into very fine, precise detail. But when you swing it the other way, it will cut you away from data that runs counter to the paradigm. You see best what you're supposed to see, just like the Swiss. And you see poorly or not at all that data that doesn't fit the paradigm. Let me now share with you the key observations about paradigms. Number one, paradigms are common. We have them in almost all aspects of our life, whether it's professional or personal, spiritual or social. Point number two, paradigms are useful. Now, you may have thought I don't like paradigms because all the things I've said about them, but that's not the case. In fact, they show us what's important and what's not. They help us find important problems, and then they go on to give us rules for helping to solve those problems. They focus our attention, and that's good. But, and this is point number three, and it's a warning, sometimes your paradigm can become the paradigm, the only way to do something. And when you're confronted with an alternative idea, you reject it out of hand. Now that can lead to a nasty disorder. I call that disorder paradigm paralysis. Paradigm paralysis is a terminal disease of certainty. It's easy to get, and more than a few institutions have been destroyed by it. That's exactly what happened to the Swiss watch manufacturers in 1968. This reminds me of a phrase. Those who say it cannot be done should get out of the way of those who are doing it. Point number four, the people who create new paradigms are usually outsiders. They are not part of the established paradigm community. Now, they can be young, they can be old. Age seems to be irrelevant. But what is clear is they are not invested in the old paradigm, so they have nothing to lose by creating the new. And this means something very special for you, because if you want to find the new paradigms that are developing in your field, you must look beyond the center to the fringes, because almost always the new rules are written at the edge. That's where Xerox started. That's where Apple computers began. That's where the women's movement started. All of them at the edge. Point number five, those practitioners of the old paradigm who choose to change to the new paradigm early in its development, I call them paradigm pioneers, have to be very courageous. Because you see, the evidence provided by the new paradigm does not prove that they should be doing this. Now, let me quote from Thomas Kuhn, because he writes about this situation the very best. The person who embraces a new paradigm at an early stage must often do so in defiance of the evidence provided by the problem solving. He must, that is, have faith that the new paradigm will succeed with the many large problems that confront it, knowing only that the older paradigm has failed in a few. A decision of that kind can only be made on faith. The mark of a true paradigm pioneer is great courage and trust in their judgment. Now for the last point, and the most important. You can choose to change rules and regulations. Human beings are not genetically encoded to just one way of looking at the world. You can choose to shrug off one paradigm and adopt a new paradigm. You can choose to see the world anew. That's why I'm such an optimist about the future. Now, to challenge you to flex your paradigms, I would like to give you the paradigm shift question. Whenever I'm with an organization or company, I always ask this question of them. What today is impossible to do in your business, but if it could be done, would fundamentally change what you do? Think about that. Hard. Ask that question, play with it, but ask it on a regular basis, everywhere in your organization, because the answers to that question will take you to the boundaries of your paradigm. And once you are there, you will be ready to see the next paradigms coming. Remember, what is impossible today may be the norm tomorrow. And your challenge is either to cause that to happen or be ready to pioneer.
Well, folks, let's shift our focus away from a general paradigm perspective to the fact that we all are part of the legal industry. And so, as part of the legal industry, we went to law school and we learned the legal paradigm. And the legal paradigm has to do with what we are considered charged to do. And that is to resolve disputes. This is a 400-year-old system invented in England, brought to the United States. It's called litigation. It's really been the only way until the early 1900s, when a group of very powerful attorneys and businessmen went to the legislature and said, we don't want to take our dispute to the public court where people are looking at criminal cases, all kinds of cases. We want to be able to hire our own private judge. And we want the legislature to pass that law, and we're going to call it arbitration, whereby that decision will be more powerful than a judge's decision, because a judge makes mistakes, he can be appealed. On the other hand, the arbitrator's decision is called full, final, and binding. I thought this was a great change for the legal industry. Well, I learned how to be an arbitrator, did many arbitrations, helped bring the American Arbitration Association to Hawaii. And then in the 1960s and early 1970s, a new system was promoted to the legal industry. And instead of using the idea of right and wrong, which is the basis of litigation and arbitration, we started using a third party who would talk to both parties confidentially, secretly, individually, and tell them, and these are the key premises of this new system, what is in your best interest? We need to have you compromise, because if you don't compromise, you're going to be stuck in litigation. And so the idea of mediation, helping people see what is in their best interest, grew very popular. I thought that was going to be the biggest change the legal profession ever made. That's why I ended up finding that 1990 little show we just saw. But my career has been based in the construction industry, so I kept up to date in a lot of the literature coming out. And I discovered something else was happening. In 1986, the biggest builder in the world, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, got a new CEO, General Henry Hatch. Henry Hatch began to look at what he now had to administer. And what really caught his eye is that there were over 1,100 lawsuits against the Corps. And he says, this is crazy. This is something we can't live with. And so the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers established an office at Texas A&M University where they had access to everybody in the university. And they said, here's how I build now. You guys take a look and tell me, is there a better way whereby I won't have lawsuits? I won't have disputes. Texas and A&M studied this for 2 years and came back and had a new system, which they call partner. So, what is this new system? Well, what this new system was something that the Army said we will begin using on our big projects. They started out with 2 projects, one in Alabama, $100 million water project, similar project in Oregon, and by God, everything worked out the way it was originally designed. Well, General Hatch said, okay, we're going to partner every project that the Corps has to build. And, over a certain dollar amount. And they began to see the number of disputes plummet. Then other branches of the service, the construction part of the Navy, the construction part of the Marines, adopted partners. Then a number of state construction agencies, the biggest of which is California. You have Caltrans, the biggest agency of any state. They build all the roads, all the bridges, all the tunnels, bases. I mean, Caltrans began to do all their building projects using partnering. And so I'm looking for statistics, and there are statistics all over the place. There is so much published about partnering, but I'm trying to find something recent that makes the point. And so there's an article Caltrans published about their experience building using partnering and set it against projects that did not use partnering. And what they found was 71% of the partnered projects had 0 lost time accidents. 76% of the project came in on or under budget. 98% of the project came in on time or early. And the most amazing thing to me was this 4th item. For every dollar Caltrans spent on the partnering facilitation process, hiring partnering facilitators, they saved $60. ROI, return on investment, 60 to 1. Well, when I read about this and I began to study it, I said, I'm going to train myself to be a partnering facilitator, and I did. Got involved in some small construction projects here in Hawaii, and I began to see the value. But so far, we've only talked about construction. So, what about outside of construction? Well, right now, if you look at all the literature, it only talks about construction partnering. I learned how to do that, and I had a number of interesting charges and experiences. 1997, I was approached by a friend who was in the government, but very close to the visitor industry. And he says to me, he says, Jerry, the visitor industry is scared that the 1998 legislature is going to pass a hotel room tax. And this could put us at a big disadvantage to other tourist markets. Do you think partnering could help get the kind of legislation that would not be harmful to the industry? Thought about it for a little while, and I said yes. So I was hired by Hawaii Visitor Convention Bureau, HVCB, put together a small team, partnered the entire visitor industry. So at the end of the partnering retreat, we had a list. These are the things we cannot live with. And these are the things that would benefit not just the industry, but the Hawaii economy, the public at large. And so then we invited members from the House and the Senate and said, draft a bill, incorporating the good, making sure the bad is not part of it. Drafted a bill. These same friends of the visitor industry sponsored the bill. We worked with the HVCB to have people go and testify about the bill. And at the end of the year, we basically got the bill we designed at the partnering. Set up a new agency, by the way. HTA, the Hawaii Tourism Authority, receives the hotel room tax money and spends it in the best interest of just not the industry, but of Hawaii at large. 2013, good friend, colleague, you probably know him, Craig Wagner. And I were having a conversation. He says, Jerry, I'm the incoming president of HSBA. Do you think partnering can help my term be more effective? And I said, absolutely. And not only that, you are not a profit-making company. You don't have $1 in your budget. I'll do it without charge. Did it for the HSBA in 2013. Craig calls me at the end of the year and says, we accomplished everything we designed at the partner. Thank you. Craig followed up by sending me a letter I'm going to give the people here a copy of, and it'll be available for people online, that basically says, partnering works where strategic planning doesn't work. This is the way to go. So, what is the process? Well, that's a lecture in and of itself, but let's kind of touch on what are the highlights of what the Army and Texas A&M invented. First of all, the partnering requires that everybody who is important to success, the stakeholders, are all part of the process. And if you're the developer, you're the person with the money, you can require that by contract. So then, as the designers, Texas and the Army, they designed a survey to go out to all the stakeholders who will participate in the partnering. But it's a different kind of survey than what is usually sent. This is a survey that doesn't care about the past. This is a survey, how do you feel what's going to happen after 3 months? What problems? What good things? And there is a process by which this process identifies, by using brainstorming, every possible result, and then limits them down to the number that can be worked with, like 3 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals. With the results of the survey, the facilitator then designs a retreat. Designed by Texas, it was a retreat that went over 2 days. When I did this for the state bar, we had a retreat of 5 hours. But at the end of the bar's retreat, we had 4 specific goals. We had people who have taken personal responsibility to make sure those goals were accomplished. And yes, they were. Well, you know what? Human beings are not always able to change. So we have follow-up sessions. Are we on what we designed at the partnering, or are we off? And so what gets accomplished? Well, first of all, part of the partnering is everybody gets to know one another, not as their professional duty, but as friends. There are fun games designed by Texas that people work together on and solve problems and get to know one another. Everybody knows everybody else by first name. We talk about values. Everybody has values that come out of the partnering that are the same. Values like, I'm not going to try to take control of this problem. I will look to the entire group. Values like, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to even exaggerate to get my idea the accepted one. And having those values are reminders as things go along when you feel somebody is not adhering. There are specific goals. And this is what is easy in construction partnering. You build these plans for this money at this, in this time period. Well, outside of construction, how do you decide the goals? Well, exactly what we did with the visitor industry. We can't live with this, but this will be good for everyone. And what is the bottom line? The bottom line is taking any group and making them into a team. So let's go back to Joel Barker and his tape. What is the present paradigm? It is dispute resolution. What is the preferred paradigm? The preferred paradigm is dispute prevention. And I know it works because I have done it both in construction projects and outside of construction. And so I'm thinking, I'm now 82 years old. My father lived to 93. I figure I've got some good years ahead of me. I have decided to dedicate the rest of my life to seeing if I can't get my colleagues in the bar to see this is where Hawaii should go. We should be the leaders of the nation to stop changing dispute resolution into dispute prevention. So, this is a new practice area for lawyers. You can learn how to be a facilitator. You can just know to take clients to colleagues who have learned the process of doing partnering to help them make sure they stay in dispute prevention. In my opinion, I've thought a lot about this. We still need the litigation system for certain cases, like criminal cases. You got to make sure you're right that somebody violated a criminal law beyond a reasonable. You still need to go to litigation. You want to change social norms. We know tobacco is bad. Lawsuits were the instigation for changing the paradigm of smoking. And so, what are my thoughts? My thoughts are we need a cadre of lawyers to begin to see this should be part of your legal practice. This should be the way clients are informed when they start a new venture to prevent problems from becoming disputes needing litigation. And so I'm asking you folks, think about it if you want to be part of this, and let's see if we can't spread the word so that we get lots of lawyers thinking about dispute prevention. So how do we start? Well, we start by learning about it and excuse me, and here's a QR code where you can let me know if you're interested. Then what I plan to do is start by sending out further information, and then when we have enough interested people, start having meetings to decide how we're going to do this. Guys, I have practiced law as the only thing I have ever done. I have never started a business. I don't have a design for that. But what I'm looking for are colleagues who see the value of partnering so that we can work together and find the best way to do that. With that, it's close to the time for me to answer any questions.
If not, I think some questions on Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, so looks like the first. Okay. Oh, can you make a recording of this webinar? Yes, this recording will be available on our on the HSBA website. So if you go to hsba.org/coffee hour archives, you'll be able to see the list of previously recorded coffee hours. I will have it uploaded either this week or sometime early next week. Just FYI. All right. Any questions here on the floor? If not, on Zoom, you can use the Q&A function to type in your questions. If not, yeah, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A function.
One of my partnering colleagues who's helping me build this is Vanessa Grace. Vanessa, you have a question and I must have missed something.
So what sort of groups would be interested in partnering?
Well, right now, any client who is starting a new group is somebody that their lawyer should talk to them about using partnering. Any group. I have worked with an agency of Human Services that was having all kinds of problems, partnered them. And boy, they had much better results after that. Any group is a group that can benefit from partnering. Partnering, I believe, is a work of genius. It is something that the Army has proven reduces the need for disputes. Any group. Who would be logical groups to start? Well, where I plan to start is charities. People who don't have a profit in their work. And using the experience I had with HSBA, I know I can make that charity more proficient at what they want to do. So I made a decision. I want to partner charities without charge. If you know a charity that you would like to have become more successful at what they're doing, let me know. I'm ready to go and present this and help them. And my thought is, how do people learn? Well, you know, I've never been really an educator. So I think whoever brings a client to me, I'll involve them in the whole process from step one all the way through finalizing the retreat. Also, I said I would give everybody a copy of Craig Wagnall's letter, and my associate here will pass it out right now. And Desmond, I know it's going to be available, but how do people see Craig's letter?
See, Scott, can I put it on your president's message for August?
Yes.
Okay. So that newsletter will be sent out to everyone in the morning.
I would rather it be something that people would want to reply to rather than a mass. Well, I don't care, you know.
So Jerry, I think one important thing that we want to, you've already kind of alluded to it, but what he's trying to do is establish a business that has revenue and actually make a profit. And that will be eventually providing facilitators who get paid to help people establish partnering on a project.
Absolutely.
So it's not simply a freebie, a nonprofit effort. He wants to establish a business that makes a profit and have facilitators get paid.
Absolutely. And I don't know how this thing's going to turn out. It's my first attempt outside of establishing a law firm of trying to establish a business. So I need help. Right now, I've decided this is so important for the rest of my life, I'll self-fund it. Will there be a time when we need people who will want to invest? Absolutely. But this is something that I would love to see Hawaii lead the nation on.
So it looks like there are some questions coming through on Zoom now. So there's a question. Oh, I think this is more of a statement. There is a book, Lawyers as Peacemakers, with some overlapping ideas. Idea is partner with the opposing attorneys and thereby the opposing parties. Helpful that working together to solve problems rather than fighting a win-lose scenario.
That's exactly my message. Listen, the adversary system of justice is brutal. It's a terrible way to solve problems. When I was 12 years old, I can tell you from personal experience, my uncle sued my father over my grandfather's inheritance. Those were the worst 2 years of my growing up life. It is not good for people. It is not good for organizations to use litigation, arbitration, and even mediation. Although mediation certainly has a place, possibly in partnering, because let's take the construction example. The electrical engineer has a problem with the electrical contractor's work. So rather than send an RFI down the route and then receive a reply, the electrical contractor calls the engineer. They've got 2 days to solve the problem. Otherwise, their superiors are brought in. 4 people have 2 days. And if they can't do it, the highest ranking management person in each organization gets together. You have 6 people. And if that doesn't work, you bring in the partnering facilitator to mediate a solution. That way, no problem continues to the end to go into dispute resolution. Rather, we solve the problem when it comes up.
Okay, so. Okay, next question on Zoom looks like well-written contracts are meant to avoid dispute, and yet litigation often follows. How can partnering be more successful when profit money is involved?
Partnering will be more successful because in that contract, you will require all the stakeholders to, number one, themselves be involved in the partnering, and any subcontractor who's important will have that written into their contract. That's exactly how the Army does it.
Okay, this is just a repeat of the first question, I believe. So, yeah, so this recording will be provided again on the HSBA website again. For just as another reminder. And no, this is not a CLE seminar, unfortunately. So yeah, there's no CLE credit for this seminar. Right, and I think that's all the questions on Zoom right now.
Anybody else in the room?
Not, then I think we can
Close on
Yeah.
time.
end our presentation. So yes, Scott, do you have any final words?
Oh, Jerry, that was excellent. Appreciate we're opening our eyes to a new horizon. It's wonderful. Thank you. And thank you very much for joining us on our Senior Council Division Coffee Hour. Who's our speaker next month?
So it'll be Greg Fry and Shannon Hackett in September. Yeah.
Next month is what did they call it? Silver divorce or graying divorce?
Yeah, well, I have listed here, it says later in life divorce.
Later in life divorce, something that can be helpful for all of us to have information about. So we have some really good speakers next month as well. First Thursday of the month, noon, and please join us.
Okay, awesome. Oh, it looks like there is one question. Has the speaker heard of the story about the 2 sisters and the orange?
No.
Okay, quick
Right.
answer.
So Google it.
Okay, I guess that concludes the presentation. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Too soon in the orange. Okay, I gotta go Google it. Okay. Going back to CMT.
Yeah.
And the rest of the business.
Like, stop, pick up my stuff.
Yeah, same here. Where do you?